All right. Well, welcome again to the COAA podcast, which is devoted to the idea that a team of people led by a good owner sharing best practices and a culture built on trust and respect will complete better projects. I'm Howie Ferguson, the Executive Director of the Construction Owners Association of America, or COAA. And today we'll be talking with one of our very best members and volunteers and a friend, Melanie Ford with the University of Georgia. Melanie, if you would just kind of the Reader's Digest version, tell us first about your professional journey and how you wound up where you are doing what you do.
Okay, thanks, Howie and Lucy. Um, so currently, I'm the Senior Director of Construction for the University of Georgia Architect's Office. UGA has two different departments that handle construction projects. One of them is our Facilities Management Department, and they handle kind of our smaller minor renovations and infrastructure projects. And then I work for the Architect's Office, and we handle all of the capital projects here at UGA and major renovations. I worked in the private sector before this. And just, I guess, to start from the beginning, I went off to school to be an architect. I went to Auburn University and I went through 2 years of the architecture program and was taking building science classes at the same time. I actually had never heard of construction management before, and the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction at Auburn houses building science as well as architecture in the same program. And so while I was taking classes in architecture and design, was also taking classes in construction management and learned about this program while I was there. And I really struggled in architecture from the standpoint of I'm kind of a black and white kind of person a lot of times. And so I struggled with the concept that your designs were subjective. The grading of your designs was kind of subjective based upon the professor's likes and dislikes. And so I wanted something a little bit more concrete. And so after going through 2 years of that, not being completely happy with where I was, I figured out that I really liked the construction classes a whole lot more than I liked the architecture classes. And so I switched in my third year into building science. And the kind of funny part of this is, so I'm a little bit older and heading towards, retirement at some point in the not too distant future, a few more years. And so when I started, there were not very many women in this industry at all. There were three women that were in the entire program when I was there at Auburn, and we had some. When I first switched into the program, the dean of the department told me, yeah, that's fine. I can see you switching over and I don't have a problem with that. And he said, but probably all you'll be doing for your whole life is estimating. He said, because I can't see you telling some hard hat wearing, tobacco chewing, 50-year-old man where the hell he can put his steel. And, at the time, I was very shy and insecure about everything. I really didn't know a whole lot about construction or architecture or anything. And so I just said, okay, I remember being like a little puppy. Okay, sounds great. Estimating, what's that? He explained it to me. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. I can do that my whole life. No problem. So I switched over into it. And then I got a book award my second year in the program, which was a $500 scholarship that was from a general contractor. And so we had this dinner celebration for everybody who had gotten awards. And I sat across the table from a contractor. And he started just grilling me. It's this dinner award celebration thing, and he is grilling me about what I'm going to do when I graduate. And I said, oh, Professor Brandt said I'm going to be an estimator. And I was all excited about it. And he basically said, but you don't have any field experience. You're never going to amount to anything. You're not going to be able to understand this industry if you don't know what you're doing, and you can't learn anything if you're just sitting in an office. And I remember just kind of like nodding my head and, picked up my tray and made some excuse, and I went and sat somewhere else because he just made me really uncomfortable. And then my
Hmm.
last favorite story of this and growing up in this industry is um, I had an interview with in the placement office with a very well-known large general contractor that we actually do business with now. And the president of the company, I was the last interview of the day. I walked into the interview. He looked at me and started packing his stuff up. He asked me three questions, and they were something along the lines of, what is your name? When do you graduate? and great, nice to meet you. And I don't remember what the third question was. And he just packed up his stuff. And I remember walking out of there just kind of thinking, I'm never going to get a job. And so I was fortunate enough to there was two owners of a construction company in Atlanta, Winter Construction Company, Bob and Arnie Silverman. My maiden name is Bernstein, and they were Jewish. And they took a chance on me because we had that in common. And I'm actually not Jewish, but my heritage is my father's Jewish. And so anyway, and I have since asked him, I said, why did you give me a shot? And he kind of joked and he said, well, he said, we might have been willing to take a chance on a young lady whose last name was Bernstein as opposed to just a redneck, which kind of made me laugh because they were from New York. And so they had come down here, bought this construction company, and had started it. So they took a chance on me. And I will say it was absolutely phenomenal for me because Arnie Silverman is just a fabulous mentor and teacher and really, taught me the ins and outs of the trade. And so I went to work for Winter and I worked for them for 12 years. I will also say there was a superintendent there, Jimmy Harrelson, and I would go out to the job site on Saturday mornings and he would put me to work as if I was a laborer. And he taught me things. He taught me how to finish concrete. He taught me how to, mortise in a door lock. He taught me how to just do junky stuff like, hanging fire extinguisher cabinets or putting on door signs or things like that. So I had some really fantastic mentors and people that were willing to take a chance on me. And so I worked for Winter for 12 years. During that time, I ended up moving over to Athens to build the Classic Center, which is the big civic center here. And I fell in love with the town and told them I wasn't going to leave. And so they let me set an office up for them here in Athens. And then they decided to pull out of Athens after about 5 years. And I went to go work with a small contractor here, it's a company out of Danielsville, Witzel Construction Services. And I was a small minority partner and vice president in the firm. And we did a lot of historic preservation, restoration work, and light commercial stuff. And so we did that for about 8 years. And then the economy tanked in 2007. And I had 3 kids and I needed a little bit more job security. And this job came open at UGA. And so I took it and here I am. So that's kind of my career and how I got into the industry. Probably a little bit more long-winded than you wanted to hear, but
No, but
It's a
some of the
great story.
anecdotes, it
Yeah.
all shapes who you are now, all those experiences, even the tough ones. So no, you're good. If you would, Melanie, before we transition to some other kind of bigger picture stuff, in the interest of time, I know you cut short the most recent thing you've done because you're a lifelong learner. Talk a little bit about this master's program you just completed in your thesis. I think that's pretty fascinating.
so one of the huge benefits of working at a university, and each university is different, but at working at University of Georgia is you get to go to school for free. And I love learning. And so have been taking advantage of that. So since I've been here, I have gotten my master's in historic preservation. And then I also am wrapping up my master's in landscape architecture. All I have left to do is finish my thesis to get my master's in landscape architecture. And so my thesis topic for Masters in Landscape Architecture is about the moon trees. And so if you don't know what the moon trees are, I encourage you to just, do a search in the search engine for NASA moon trees and all the information will pop up. But the short version is that it's seeds that were taken by Stuart Roosa, who was an astronaut on the Apollo 14 mission. And he took them to the moon and they orbited the moon numerous times. And then they came back here to Earth and they germinated them. They were trying to study them and see whether or not there was any impact of deep space, because this was back in 1971. And people really didn't know what was, it was the kind of the beginnings of the space program. So they wanted to experiment with them and see if there was any impact of deep space on their growth patterns. They learned that there was no impact on them. But those moon trees, the seeds were actually disseminated as part of a bicentennial celebration event. So if you go, you can find there's actually some bicentennial times. They did newspaper articles and reports on all of the different activities that were happening as part of the bicentennial. And so one of their events was to send all these tree seeds out into the United States and try to plant them in different locations and celebrate, kind of a lot of community spirit associated with the United States, with the space program and all those things. And all that's great, except that they got planted, and some of them got signs, some of them got really tiny signs that got mowed over or stomped on or disappeared over the years. But for the most part, all these trees kind of got forgotten about. And so I have spent the last many months, one, just kind of taking my vacations, traveling around the United States, looking at the moon trees that have been documented and kind of in trying to determine if there's been any additional impact since they got planted on the physical landscape, and then also speaking to people, trying to find out what impact they've had on the social culture as well. And then I've also, as part of this fun thing, there were only two that were known about in the state of Georgia. One was in Athens, Georgia, which is the one, it had actually been forgotten about because it didn't have a sign. And there was probably only a handful of local people that really knew that it still existed here. And I discovered it by accident, or rediscovered it by accident, which is what started me on this adventure. And then there is one in Waycross, Georgia. And hot off the press, what I have since found is that I've actually uncovered two more. And what I have learned is that there were 4 trees that were planted here as part of the bicentennial, but there is one outlier, the one in Waycross, that's been known for a long time, that actually came pretty much right off the rocket ship. And the head of the science program there at Waycross at that Research and Education Center germinated it himself and planted it. So there's 4 bicentennial trees. I now know where 3 of them are, and then we have the one in Waycross, and then I'm still trying to find one. There's one in Savannah, and I'm hoping that I have a bunch of feelers out there, doing a bunch of research, and hopefully I'm going to be able to locate that one before too long.
I love the hot off the press thing. So Melanie, where I thought you were going, and I'm just extrapolating here wildly, but you say bicentennial, that's 76. We elected Carter as president that year, and I'm thinking, why didn't they plant one in Plains? That would be perfect. Like,
They
right?
actually, well, see, so this was actually a forestry, U.S. Forest Service project. It really wasn't a
Mhm.
NASA project. And so they planted them usually in association with a public facility or in something associated with the Georgia Forestry Association or a forestry association. So there is one at the Research and Education Center in Waycross. There is one in Macon at the Georgia Forestry headquarters. There is one at the Georgia State Capitol. And that's the one that I just actually was speaking to the governor and his wife about that one, and we're hoping to do a rededication of that one. And then the one here in Athens is at the old public library, and the one in Savannah, like I said, still chasing that one down.
I was rooting for there to be one in Plains. Hey, Lucy, how about Melanie name dropping, hanging out with the governor? Huh?
As one does
Well,
on a Saturday,
That's right. That's awesome, Melanie. That's a great story. Okay, transitioning a little bit to your organization at UGA and thinking about, and you've seen plenty, like I have, different cycles. You mentioned the economy tanking and all the different predictable and unpredictable things from 9/11 to pandemics to market, yada, yada, yada. Right now, and of course, it could change in 3 months, but currently, what's sort of on your front burner, if you will, in terms of a concern when it comes to the projects y'all are trying to plan and execute? Is it market still? Is it what's on your mind these days?
it's qualified people, to be honest with you. Some of it, you talk about the cyclical thing. We have at University of Georgia, we have people that are retiring. I mean, when the pandemic hit, we had several people that retired then, and now we have people that are retiring. And so the institutional knowledge that always exists here is kind of transitioning, I will say. And we've also hired several people. And since you worked at a university, I'm sure nothing is there's it's a huge, place, and there are a lot of people you have to coordinate with, and communication is so critical. And trying to find people and then be able to train them or have the time to train them isn't happening because we are just still so busy. There are so many projects coming around. We have 3 brand new out of the ground buildings that we just started design on that are huge capital projects. We have a new residence hall, a new dining and wellness facility, a new parking deck, and those are just the 3 brand new things. We have 2 buildings at our aging Science Hill area, where we have two buildings, our old chemistry building and our old bioscience building, that we are in the process of. One of them is halfway through renovation, but we gutted the whole thing, renovating it, about to do the same thing with the bioscience. We just completed a brand new poultry science building, and we are moving everybody out of old poultry science and going to renovate that. So we have so much work going on, and we don't have qualified, trained people. And everybody's into the technology these days, but sometimes you actually need, old school things. You need people that can communicate with each other. You need people that can pull a tape and understand this is how you lay out an electrical room. And it's great to put everything on BIM, but that doesn't necessarily solve all your problems. So struggling with some of that. And in the COA fashion, I will tell you that after, truthfully complaining about it's struggling, I can't be everywhere I need to be, I finally had an epiphany, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to teach a PM class, just like your COA OTI classes. So I'm teaching what I dubbed PM 101 to 6 of our younger project managers that came from either different walks of life, or they're architects that haven't been in the field with a construction project. And so every Monday we just meet for an hour and go through everything and, talk about, I literally, it's I'm doing it kind of like different subject things. So like last week we talked about pay requests. How do you check a pay request? What are the things you're looking for? Next week we're going to be talking about closeout. And I know those seem random, but I'm tailoring this to what is actually happening on their projects right now that they need help with. But I did do a whole broad overview that I started about 3 months ago. And so we spent, every Monday doing this. And then it's like, okay, what are the critical things that everybody needs to know now that I haven't covered in detail? And that's kind of what we're focused on.
And no, by the way, that didn't sound random at all. It's there's like an infinite number of things you could cover in those different hour-long sessions, and nobody is perfect at any of them, and it's like a never-ending thing. So no, that's closeout and pay apps are two pretty big ones. That's awesome, Melanie, and not surprising. You were not only a lifelong learner, but a lifelong sharer, which is, I think, why you find a nice home at COA, because that's kind of what we're about.
Absolutely.
So thinking about, again, kind of your internal organization, and you could go broader to the different internal University of Georgia clients you serve, but I'm thinking more about your office, your department. When y'all talk about, or maybe it's broader, and you talk about projects being successful or not, the obvious ones that everyone, even newer folks, would know: timeliness, schedule, was it on time, was it late, was it early, budget, was it on budget, over budget, under budget, and scope quality. Did we build what we envisioned and needed to do? Well, beyond those three, which obviously that's like the big three, what are some other ways, if there are other ways, that y'all consider projects successful or unsuccessful? Or is it just kind of those three?
No, it's definitely not those three. So because we have a facilities management department and we are still here, the people that were responsible for the construction, we try to make sure that we are putting things in the building that are able to be maintained and that our facilities management department is going to be happy with. And in addition to that, we have our end users that are actually in the facilities, and can they do the science that they were intended to do? And I'll just give you one thing that came up yesterday is, honestly, I typically attend all of the operation and maintenance training sessions myself in conjunction with the facilities management people. So I can, I ask the dumb questions, things that are, if they're not clear to me, they may not be clear to the facilities management people. And the older guys already know how to do some of this stuff, but the younger people don't want to ask the questions in front of some of these, older guys. It's just a little bit different, environment in the facilities department. And so I have no problem asking the dumb questions, making sure everything's clearly explained so that it's on the video, so they can refer to it back later on if necessary. But one thing that popped up just yesterday was I got a message from our HVAC maintenance department saying, hey, this fume hood isn't operating like it's supposed to, and we tried to go take care of it, and there is a passcode on it. Who has this passcode? And quite frankly, that was news to me. I had no idea we had passcodes on some of these, and I have since learned after digging around, it is a passcode that was put on by the Phoenix valve, the lab valve manufacturer, because they don't want anybody messing with, the parameters that they set up. And there was only one person at our institution that had those passcodes, and it was the research research facilities work group, but it was literally one person in there. So those things shouldn't happen, right? And so it's like trying to make sure that everything, to me, that's not a success that you have something like that, right? So I kind of gauge our successes on how many phone calls I get back, how user friendly things are, both for the occupants and for the facilities management department. So that's a big one, that those types of things, pop up periodically.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. And there's so many other ways. It was kind of a softball question because you could have said that or sustainability. And here's another one that maybe is not what, the person who signs your paycheck would necessarily agree with, but it matters when it comes back to retaining and attracting talent is the experience, like the enjoyment, the fulfillment that you ought to get if you're leading a project like that or helping. Maybe there's a measurable out there for how much did you enjoy and learn and how rewarding and fulfilling was it. Again, some people may, that's kind of soft, who cares if it was on time on, but well, if someone's happy in what they're doing, there's a good chance they're going to keep working at the University of Georgia managing projects. So maybe it does matter.
It matters a lot, quite frankly. You talk about job satisfaction and working in an environment with people that you want to work with. And I will be honest and say that a lot of the enjoyment that I get is from being out there and dealing with all of the different, interface users that we deal with our contractors, with our architects, with the end users, the project team. And that's
Hmm.
really ultimately what's the most important thing to me, is being able to work on those teams.
100%. Yeah. It's ultimately, Melanie, always, it's like ironic, but it's kind of, again, it's like a crux of COA. Most people, the vast majority of people in our industry, certainly those working on the owner's side, and obviously engineers and architects, and are very technically oriented people. But the ironic little secret they don't tell you in school is that, okay, it's good to have all that stuff and all the field experience, but you better have some people skills or you're going nowhere. And that's the funny little piece that I think COA kind of helps with to some degree.
Yeah, I've heard that actually from some of my contractors, that trying to find, with the new generation of students, trying to find people that can actually have a conversation, that can look up from their computers while they're doing BIM, or, looking up from Procore or any of that kind of stuff, that they're, very, very challenged to be able to carry on a conversation sometimes, and to be able to have those people skills you're talking about. So yes, it's definitely something that really needs to be fostered in the school systems these days.
Yeah. Okay. I just got one more, and if Lucy has one, she can jump in too. But I'm curious, Melly, because I've interacted with and seen you, but I've never seen you in a situation that I'm sure occurs because it's life in this industry where there's conflict or tension. How do you, and everyone's style is different. Mine typically, and it sometimes backfires, is try to handle a situation like that with some humor or maybe self-deprecation and kind of make my, again, sometimes it backfires, but that's kind of my thing. How do you handle, and maybe it's a case by case, it varies, but if you come across a thing, whether it's internal or dealing with a project team or someone's just pissed, how do you deal with that?
Like you said, it's kind of a case by case situation, but I will tell you what I learned early on in this industry, is that you really have to be able to stand up for yourself, and the way to do that is to know what you're talking about, or to have the confidence to be able to instill in everyone that you know what you're talking about. So early on, I learned, don't pretend like you know something that you don't know, and keep your mouth shut and listen and learn. And then when you do know those things, or you've learned things, I present it in a way such that, I'm inquisitive. And so I ask questions until something's going to make sense to me, or until the other person sees something differently. But honestly, one of my end users is very, very, very antagonistic. A lot of people, I mean, he's known, very infamous throughout the University of Georgia. He's a research scientist, insanely intelligent, does not have phenomenal people skills sometimes. And we were in an owner architect contractor meeting just a couple of days ago, and he is adamant that he wants the computer system to function the way he wants it to function he wants an internal network as opposed to hooking directly into UGA's network. And he just literally starts railing into me during the middle of this meeting. And I just said, we are not going to talk about this in this meeting. I said, this is an internal issue we need to discuss later. He goes, no, we're going to talk about it. And I said, no, there are 12 people sitting in this meeting right now, and we're not going to waste their time. I said, we can talk about it afterwards. And when the meeting was over and I said, okay, let's have that conversation. Well, he had calmed down at that point after rolling his eyes at me. So, but he had calmed down. And honestly, I've had situations out on a job site where, one of my grading contractors still tells me this story to this day and laughs about it, but I'm 4'9", and I don't think I realized I was doing this, but apparently I knew there was the contractor and I were having a major disagreement about something, and I was just basically explaining loudly, I think, my perception or opinion on things. But the grading contractor told me later that I had stepped up on one of the pallets that was there so I could talk to him face to face, which kind of made me laugh because I honestly didn't realize I had done that. But what I have learned over the years, having tried out all different ways to do things, is that really the best approach is just to keep your calm, stand your ground, know what you're talking about. And if you don't try to make something up. You really have to, ask questions until something makes sense.
Yeah, and baked into all that, Melanie, which I totally respect and try sometimes unsuccessfully to do, is there's a level of humility to that approach. Meaning, when you're saying, if I don't know, I'm just going to be quiet and learn. I wish more people were like that, because again, that takes a little bit of self-confidence and humility to, like, no, I don't have all the answers, I can learn. But then once I do know, then I'm gonna stand my ground and be firm. It's a great approach.